What is up, guys? It's your boy GRC. We're coming at you live every single day at 11 a.m. Eastern, crypto in the morning. Today we have Crypto Sloth in the QQ, and we're going to be talking about Hex, Pulse Chain, Icosa, Maxi, Poly. We could go on all night. And Sloth,
What?
you scared me. You scared me. Because every time he does that, that means I didn't go live, but I did go live. So it's fine. Sloth is in the green room. We're going to be talking about Icosa, Hedron, Poly, lots of community FUD, lots of fertile green if you're a buyer right now. Like if you're a buyer, it's pretty fertile. And like, to be honest, the three guys down here, we're probably net buyers right now because crypto, we are all under the impression that crypto is probably going to 50% of the world within 5 years. I think we could all come to a ish conclusion on that feeling, 3 to 7 years, let's say. And that's called absolutely explosive. That's everyone. Solar system, 50% of them. I like that kind of action for crypto in the morning.
You already know what time it is.
Crypto in the morning.
Crypto in the morning.
Crypto in the morning.
We ain't on phone.
Crypto in the morning. Crypto in the morning.
We're gonna take notes.
Crypto in the morning.
Crypto in the morning.
Crypto in the morning.
We ain't on phone.
Crypto in the morning. Crypto in the morning.
We're gonna take notes.
Smoking a blunt on my way to the gym. 11 a.m. and I'm already tuned in. Got me some Hex and I'm making a stake. Got me some Hedron, I'm making it rain. Pay me some Maxi and that's just in case. Jim ready sent me to show you the way.
DeFi proof.
Crypto in the morning.
Crypto in the morning.
Crypto in the morning.
We ain't on phone.
Crypto in the morning. Crypto in the morning.
We're gonna take notes.
Crypto in the morning.
Crypto in the morning.
Crypto in the morning.
We ain't on phone.
Crypto in the morning. Crypto in the morning.
We're gonna take notes.
Boom.
What's up? What's up? How's it going?
Good to see you. Good to see you. It's been a while. I hope you're doing well. You had a nice Christmas and Happy New Year's, brother.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you both. Glad to be back on the show. It has been a minute. Probably the last time I was on your show was in the middle of is on my lunch break at school in some back room. now I have my actual setup. It's a legit production going on here.
Hey, we were working hard grinding through some of those Icosa concepts and those Hedron concepts. We weren't letting up. We really weren't at the time. And I think that did well for Hedron and Icosa. I really did. I think not just you and me and Sam, but like that little
I agree.
Intellectuals wanted a little take on that. And they wanted to get back a little of that rah-rah bullshit, cheerleader shit. I don't like that because some guys don't like that shit that much. I like to watch sports, but like we're talking finances, are you kidding me? This is not a joke to me. And that's why I love having Sloth on because he likes to get right into the technicals. But Sloth, I want to know first what you've been into lately, crypto-wise.
I was literally going to ask that question too. So
I want to know like where your head's been at and like what you've been thinking about. So I want to talk about obviously the stuff that we all like in here, but I want to know where your head's been at.
Yeah, no. So you bring up a good point where like there was like this really interesting period of like grinding out the educational content and really not even just the educational content, but grinding out like the conversations around it to like for us all to like elucidate like what's going on here, right? Because like we have the mechanics of the system, we kind of understand them, but then it takes that discourse to be able to like elucidate exactly what's going on and how we can take advantage of it from different angles. And so like after 90 days after the Icosa launch, when like the auctions really started, I remember like a day or two after I had like this big, like, kind of sigh of relief. I'm like, whew, like we did it. And I think we did it successfully insofar as getting the protocol of Hedron and Icosa out to the community, it being accepted by the community and people being knowledgeable on how to use it. Right. This is something that, I've been me and all of like the Hedron OGs and like the Telegram chats before it's even launched have been like building up for so long. And it felt like, the page turned because the whole system's working. It's all immutable code. And we have a plethora of T-shares in the HSI liquidation auction. Everything's running, which it hasn't been fully complete up until that moment. And so that's given me a lot of space to kind of mental space to kind of expand to like see what's going to happen next. Because at this point, talking about Hedron and Icosa, outside of small nuances and like edge case scenarios, like we pretty much have most of it figured out. It's going to be more polishing content and then making the content more accessible to like the average user. But in terms of like the information has pretty much been drilled through and is most of the people are knowledgeable about it. Where I'm going next is particularly if you guys saw my stream on like Fiat and Famous the other night, I'm going to start exploring the dynamic between inflation yield and fee generating yield, and like how both of those can be like passive income. Like there's an AP, you can represent both via like APY, and it looks like maybe they're the same. Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Okay, well, how about, because that you probably just lost everybody right there.
I was right there, but I know I'm not the smartest guy, but I love that topic. But please, yes.
Yeah.
And so inflation yield versus fee generating yield. Let's start with inflation yield and then talk about the other piece on fee generating yield, because those are both. There's the fee side could be. I mean, there's a lot of things we can cover on that side. So let's start. I feel like the inflation might be more simple to start there.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So put most simply, yield via inflation is coins that are being minted out of thin air, right? Like it's like the supply is increasing and you're getting a percentage of that supply increase. So the coins that we like, Hex, Hedron, Icosa, like Pulse Bitcoin is one, Zen, that's another inflation token. That you're getting yield from. All of them are.
He almost said bug. He almost said inflation bug. He was like, "That's an inflation bug." He was like, "I mean, token." That's just,
yeah.
Where some type of feature you get inflation.
Exactly. So you do something and then you get to mint new coins basically. And like you can represent that as an APY. Like you get X% every year, like Hex 38% on average for an average stake length. But yeah, so that's what inflation yield is. It's like the extra coins you're getting by minting new coins out of thin air, as Richard Hart would put it. Yeah.
And now, so fee generating, that's dynamic in the sense that you can have fees generated in, I can name 4 or 5 right off the top of my head, and there's probably 3 or 4 other ways that I'm not thinking about. So you want to talk about that, right? You could have transaction, or some other ones. So transaction to use the system to, it can be the form of a fee.
Basically, any kind of service that you can provide on the blockchain, typically there's a fee to any kind of thing that you're doing on the blockchain. If somebody else is providing that service for you, there's usually a fee associated with that. So like the most common one that you guys are familiar with is liquidity providing, right? You pay a fee every time you do a swap because somebody else is providing the service of making a market for you. And then if you're the person,
$40 fee this morning, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, this is, providing a service. That service generating fees is more of a typical business model that people can wrap their head around of, because a lot of the barrier to entry for something like Hex and even like Hedron, Icosa, or crypto in general, it's like where's the value coming from if these coins are just being printed out of thin air? Like that's a mental leap you have to make as like an investor or like your worldview to be able to see the value in these systems. Fee generating platforms they don't have that barrier because anybody understands, you provide a service, somebody pays for that service, and if you are capturing those fees by providing that service, it's like a traditional business model.
It's almost like if you're talking to a noob in terms of crypto, like I've said this before, there's a large gap, right, from the legacy side of the world. If I talk to, say, one of my siblings who's not into crypto, or a friend that's not into crypto, they don't have any idea about crypto. They're just like completely oblivious to,
and vice versa. I don't know anything about legacy.
But you could understand legacy probably faster than the other way around. And so to understand what Sloth is saying regards to inflation yield versus fee yield is almost the way that I use to bridge this gap between the crypto world and the legacy world to new people. Is mining is conceptually very easy to understand. and it's like that from a fee standpoint, right? Like going into the bank or whatever, they're charging you a fee for doing not much of anything, but they're still charging you a fee to do that thing, similar to the fee generation here. What about the model like BNBP?
Yeah, so that would be. Are you talking about like staking BNP? So what's the ticker again? Yeah,
BNBP.
I can comment on that to kind of, because I just look at that all the time. So BNBP, there's two ways to structure. Well, let's just talk for everyone that's listening. There's two ways to structure staking yield. Like we said, inflation, 3.69 inflation fixed into the code forever, almost regurgitating, but doesn't matter so much when you're actually coming out of the liquidity pool, really. But with BNBP, people actually come out from outside, right? We're talking about internal regurgitated yield, and then people are coming from the outside paying a fee to play a game, and then the burn from the percentage of burn in each game actually goes to the staker class. So it's instead of that, oh, we're earning more yield in BNBP, people are actually coming in and playing, therefore adding revenue to the yield model on that. But I want to open that up because I don't know what's what DeFi, all the rules and stuff. What do you guys think about the differences there? Is kind of, I love BNBP.
Yeah. And so the BNBP, that would fall into like the fee generating category because you have the token, you stake it on the platform, and then the fees generated from the platform are going to the pool of stakers. Right. That's my understanding of how that token works, right?
There's a couple different ways because there's like a lottery and like there's a couple different ways, but it just really incentivizes bringing as much yield from the outside of BNBP and then like swapping it for the token, using it within the game, and then that going. And there are pros and cons to both of those for sure. And centralization has a big deal in this talk as well, right? Like when we're talking, if everything was completely fair and all of these things were fair, Zen Crypto.network. I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean? So we're talking about the centralized. Where does the centralization come in, Sam? And then I'll bring it to Sloth. When you're talking about these different yield types, like Sloth brought the 2 yield types up. Now we're talking about a pool that kind of gets fixed into like 90% of people, like 5 or 6 people. What do you think about the differences there?
Well, one other fee thing that I guess you put it into the fee category, and so the fee model I think of to generate a yield is fees that I pay or fees that other people pay that I'm collecting, and those that could come in 2 forms, right? It can come from users who are like kind of outside the system, as in BNBP, or it can come from people who are like inside of the system. I'm thinking of like Cult, or there's this NEX token it's launching that's associated with Zen, but like where with Cult, anybody who has Cult and they do anything in Cult, they pay a transaction fee. Part of that transaction fee goes back into the yield for the staker class, right? So there's like a bunch of different ways to
reflection tokens, right?
The reflection token is next.
The reflection token, yeah. But that one, exactly. There's a transaction fee for that too, correct? And that goes back into the pool for the yield on that one. So what is your thoughts on that, right? What do you think that there's like a superior model to the other? Like in the real world, there's a million different business models. They all work. Is it the same idea here, or is there one that's like potentially superior because it's not taking from somebody else?
Yeah. So generally, like the rule of thumb or the heuristic that I use is like reflection tokens generally are kind of, they don't interest me very much just because they have a pretty bad track record. Like Dodeca is a perfect example of like a reflection token that failed. I think SafeMoon was also like a reflection token hourglass game kind of thing. I don't think like just from like a theoretical standpoint that using the mechanics of a reflection token can't work. I think there are probably ways to like hack the mechanics or like the base of how a reflection token works to like plug it into something. I don't know how that would work exactly personally. The thing that has got my attention more are things like, say, like liquid loans, Aave, Fiat, Famous. Let me think of any other ones. Illuvium is kind of doing it. where people are using the platform. It's providing some kind of service, and then those fees from the people using the service are getting paid to the stakers of the native token. So that's where more my head has personally been.
Okay. Interesting. Where it's not so much about let's, spin a story about this thing, but more so, hey, there's a desire in the marketplace for XYZ in the case of Aave or Liquidity or liquid loans, where they want people have a desire for debt and be able to use that debt or create something for that. And
exactly
that does seem like a more sustainable model from like just the jump, just off the bat. It just seems like a far more sustainable model. I agree with you. So in that front, you said you're looking at fiat. What are you kind of like thinking about with that?
Yeah. So fiat and famous. Fiat is the Aave fork, and then famous is the GMX fork. You guys know what GMX is, right? I'm pretty sure. Yeah. No. Decentralized leverage trading, basically. So like, you're familiar with Aave, Sam, right? How that works? Yeah. So basically, long story short of like GMX and what famous is, it's like the community provides the liquidity for other people to do leverage trading with. So instead of a centralized exchange providing the coins for you to do leverage, the community is providing the coins for a trader to do leverage with. And then, of course, fiat, aka or forked of Aave, it's the community is providing the coins for other people to take out as a loan. So, like, I want to take a loan against 100,000 hex. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I was just pulling up the GMX front end because there is the difference between the two of them, which you were just highlighting beautifully before I interrupted you. Decentralized perpetual exchange, trade BTC, ETH, AVAX, and other top cryptocurrencies with up to 50x leverage directly from your wallet. It's pretty incredible, actually, if you think about it. But and then we'll go over to what's the one we used to? Oh, Aave.
Yeah, and so
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Jared.
No, you go ahead. I just wanted to show the difference there. So let's just see the front end differences on these two because so Aave Liquidity Protocol, earn interest, borrow assets, and build applications. A little bit different.
And so these protocols have done really well recently. Like, Aave, I think it's coming up on its third cycle. It's still surviving. Some of the tokenomics may not be ideal, but the platform as a whole is working well. And I think GMX last year was up like 87% on the year in like a bear market, which is pretty impressive. And in addition, it's also applying those principles of like, being able to do financial things in a decentralized manner. And so, but the thing that
is GMX, sorry to interrupt you again. Is GMX a immutable, or is it, how is that structured? Is it kind of like Aave where there's somebody behind it, like messing with shit? You know what I mean?
So I don't know about GMX specifically, but I know Famous does have some admin keys behind it to mess with some of the to keep. I can't remember exactly what it is, so I'll have Dylan correct me tomorrow. I'm having a chat with him. He's one of the guys associated with the project, but they do have the ability to move some levers basically associated with like fees that you're paying to like deposit or withdrawal. That's dynamic relative to the liquidity that's there. So they do retain a right to change some things, but it has nothing to do with like withdrawing coins, for instance. Like they don't have the access to be able to like take out the coins you've deposited.
So there's actually a liquidity providing token for GMX, which is called GLP. So GLP is the liquidity provider token, accrues 70% of the platform's generated fees. And GMX is the utility and governance token, accrues 30% of the platform's generated fees. And that's for GMX.io, guys. Interesting.
Is that on Ethereum?
Yeah.
So it's like that
GMX
Arbitrum, Avalanche, EVM shit. And
it's on base layer.
Where is it?
It's on a couple like side chains. I think Avalanche
and Arbitrum.
Arbitrum, yeah.
Okay.
Which see, I'm saying we haven't done all this like Arbitrum, Avalanche like so much. I just haven't gotten myself to get really over there. But I've been hearing Avalanche a lot more. I do need to do more.
They're EVM chains. You guys know how to use them. pretty straightforward. Once you've done one, you've done them all in a lot of ways. But where was I? Okay, here's where I was. The thing about, even though these protocols are really great and they offer a pretty cool service, and we can talk about like specifically why it's important to have these things. They don't support Hex and Hex ecosystem tokens, right? Like Hex is kind of like the weird stepchild of crypto that no one in the mainstream likes to talk about that much. So we don't have these services available to us, and so that's essentially one of the really great things that I think about Fiat and Famous is they're giving us the ability to plug into these DeFi tools, to be able to take out collateralized loans, to be able to hedge your positions with leverage positions, something I'm sure you're pretty familiar with, Sam. And also at the same time, it allows us to have more yield farming opportunities with our tokens, because if they're supporting Hex, Hedron, Icosa, and all of like the other Pulse X, all of those tokens, right? Where did those tokens come from? They come from us. And so our ability to obtain these coins via inflation directly affects our ability to obtain the fees of these platforms. And so if we just make the assumption that these platforms are going to be successful, then your ability to capture the inflation of like Hex, Hedron, Icosa is going to pay more dividends later in your ability to translate that inflation yield into fee generation yield.
And you prefer the idea of something like GMX as opposed to acting as the middleman, say with LP, because that's a very, very common thing in legacy, and it's very, very common in the crypto space. And I don't know why more people don't do it, but it's incredibly the amount of yield you earn is what others yield on an annual basis. You do on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
What drew you to say GMX Famous versus say something like LP?
Well, they simply offer more services, right? Like with LPing, it's just spot trading, and so that is one of the things that you can do to earn fee generation yield from your inflation yield. This is just another form of it that I'm currently interested in exploring. Doing a V3 position, you earn those fees, and then it's kind of the same thing in GMX. You place your coins into the PHLP token, so they have a bunch of tokens that you can deposit in there, and then you can withdraw any of those tokens, but that token is earning you fees in the background. It's a little bit simpler than a V3 position in that you just deposit it and then you don't have to worry about setting positions. So in terms of a difficulty factor, it could probably appeal to people who are less apt to spend time messing around with positions or taking the time to learn it. And think what else? The impermanent loss is spread across a wider basket of assets. So with the impermanent loss on a liquidity pool position, it's either one direction or the other, which there are pros and cons to this, because if you don't care about which one you hold over time, impermanent loss is less of a factor. But if you want to say maybe mitigate the impermanent loss across a basket of assets, something like providing liquidity for Famous would be better for that specific use case. Generally, I try not to frame things as better or worse than each other, but I frame it as positive and negatives or trade-offs within that specific system. And so all of us have different investment thesis and different life circumstances, and that is in flux with each individual person over time. And so the more levers that we have that we're able to use and that we understand how to use, the better we're able to make our portfolio work for us at different given time, at different points in time throughout our lifetime, basically. And so having these extra tools, I think, is just a net add, even though maybe with the LPing that you do, you might be able to outperform the person who is just using, say, Famous or Fiat, for an example. But that's just from the fee generation standpoint. You also have the ability to utilize these services, let's say, down the road when the value of our tokens is much higher. And actually, that's something I think GRC, I have a little segment or like a little thought about liquidity and stuff like with Fiat and how, yeah, I can get into that in a bit, but I'll stop that right there.
What I haven't looked into GMX or the other, lending protocols, very much like I've looked into liquid loans, a tiny bit of liquidity or whatever the name of that one is. Yeah.
Chicken bonds, baby. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I've looked into Aave just like ever so slightly, but it's very right. Like we just saw the pool, it's like $6.6 billion in Aave, and that's one of the lending protocols that's on Ethereum. But it just, at this moment, like you said, everybody got a different on their different journey and stuff like that. And that moment, and the risk of that for me at this moment is just, it's too high of a risk given the volatility of crypto. But what would you say if you think of volatility as risk? What are some other risks that you have seen with GMX, right? Like, because you're like, okay, impermanent loss for liquidity providing, but you could also take the same type of hedge by, if you wanted to do a basket of assets and do multiple pairs, right? Because that would be, we always look at impermanent loss as asset A and B, but like you said, if we used a basket, and I've never gone through that thought experiment, but what if you did a basket of, say, 4 assets of, say, if it was Ethereum, USDC, Hex, Hedron, and Icosa, right? And you provided liquidity in some number of, right? I don't know, you could provide 25 different pair settings between those two things. But say if you did just 5 pair settings between those two, you could also offset the risks associated with impermanent loss. And that's actually something I've literally never heard of. And I haven't really thought about any new unique points of view on LP in a minute. That's why I haven't had any. I haven't made any new videos on it. So this is very fascinating. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think just off the top of my head, I think that you could probably work it out mathematically if you probably backtrack it if you want, and then there are probably ways to model it out as well. But like just like off the top of my head, like that sounds like a way to kind of mimic what's happening with like the PHLP or the GLP token with your own personal LP positions. I think that's probably a legit thing to do. If you make like, you do like a Hex, ETH, Hedron, ETH, Icosa, ETH pair, like all of them. So you have all the different things connecting to ETH at the center. And then even if you wanted to, you could connect them all out on the outside as well. At that point, the first thing that comes to mind is like, do you have enough coins to be able to do this to make it like effective, right? So it's like you're setting up. I just described like probably 6 LP pools, and then so to make it worth the fees on Pulse Chain, it'll matter less. But if you're doing it on Ethereum, each needs to be of a certain size to be able to make sure that the fees aren't eating up your income.
But it's still similar, even if the fees are cheaper via that, it would just have to be a bunch more transactions to earn yield, right? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, when I go over to Binance, you're going to have to look for some volume spikes that are pretty intense for you to really get anything out of it.
Yeah.
But on Ethereum, I mean, you could make 4%, 5%, maybe 3% on a real thick asset. And it's just, it's a lot to talk about.
Yeah. But I'm sure you guys like 4% on $1,000 and 4% on $100,000 is a very different type of 4%. And like, I know you, Sam, like every time you got to move your bands, that's like 2 to 3 transactions every time you do it. So you got $1,000, you earn 4% a day. Like that's amazing, but you've earned $40. And now each thing you have to do, say on a good day, is $10. You've lost 50% of your 4% just by moving your coins on an amount of money that is not insignificant. Like $1,000 to a lot of people is a decent amount of money that you're trying to make returns on. But like, if you got the $100,000 doing it and you're making, the $4,000 in that day, like it's starting to make more sense. Versus something with the GMX thing, you can essentially get something that mirrors that by just taking the one token and then putting it into that one pool. Maybe the fees are offset, but maybe net it's positive because you're not doing these extra adjustments, as well as you have to take into account the value of your time, right? So like, Sam, you're in a really fortunate position where you're at your computer all the time with your online business. So you're able to take advantage of these high fees. someone like me, I'm not going to be in that position because of the career route that I've chosen, being a dentist, right? Like I can't adjust in a position while I'm in somebody's mouth filling their tooth, right? Right. So like, it's just different, different strokes for different folks.
Well, 100%, 100%. And the models where you earn through fees, I like that model. I think that you're serving a purpose, and I'm curious to see like more of those come into the space. Like, however that might function. Like we saw with the gaming with BNBP, we see with the lending with the those protocols. There's several of them, LP type stuff. Excuse me, but I'm sure that there's like other creative ideas that they're just not available in the space that are going to be fascinating to watch as they play out. Because effectively, you can go through and replace your income with fee generation, to the same sense that like you have a $1 million dividend portfolio of stocks that has a yield of 4%. You get 40 grand a year. Cool. That's $3,600 per month roughly, or whatever that number is, and you live on that, right? But in the legacy world, that's $1 million in terms of portfolio. In the crypto space, you need 300 grand or 400 grand, or not even. Like, you can do it on substantially less than that and earn enough yield to live off of this. So
I'm going to switch something for 1 second. Is there a possibility that all these systems will not work in the future due to Ethereum and all of the problems that can occur with that? I'm just going to ask that question to both of you, and I want to know. And I'm talking 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years. You guys are holding these tokens. I'm holding some of these tokens. Do you guys think there's a chance? And I'm just talking about a chance that EVM could not be the future, and V3 liquidity providing could just be Ethereum's good try.
Yeah, Sam, you go first. I'm going to be back in 1 minute.
Oh, take your time. I would love. That's a classic Sam question, anyway. So,
so the possibility of them going away, I think, is a real thing. I believe that one of the things that's going to impact things in the future in several different ways is interoperability. I know a lot of people have talked about that, but like the trustless bridges, I think we're at a point in crypto where within the next 6 to 16 months or 24 months, we're going to have trustless bridges solved. And then you don't have to necessarily take your coin and wrap it to bring it somewhere, right? Like you if you want to take your one token on a bridge, you're going to get it wrapped on the other side. I think Wormhole has something slightly different, but it's not trustless, right? And so imagine being able to have your same token all over the place, so that Ethereum V3 could effectively work on all platforms. Right now, it's on this peninsula that is Ethereum, right? But what if like Aave and Uniswap V3, or even what if BNBP didn't have to launch on all the chains and it was available on all the different chains, because trustless bridges have been solved? And if somebody can go from one arena in AVAX to, they can take their AVAX token and come over to Pulse Chain, and they still have their AVAX token. Once trustless bridges are solved, like, there's a model similar to, say, Ethereum, like Uniswap, where like, okay, this is working amazingly well. Now the entire crypto space rips off Uniswap V2, right? So I think we're going to have, when this happens with trustless bridges, that's going to be a game changer for the space as a whole, because I think like, what is the saying that people say about money is that it likes to centralize, right? Like money likes to cluster together, or something along those lines. And if you see that like V3 or Uniswap is so much better, or some people probably think Aave is better than its competitors in different ways, shape, or form, or those types of things. So that's pots of capital. And now what if those pots of capital did just work on Ethereum, but Uniswap now is mobile, so to speak, because there's trustless bridges, and you can have a giant ball of liquidity that doesn't just have assets on one side or the other side. It's just think of more, instead of how the space currently is, think more like outer space, where you can go anywhere you want to go, from this star to that star to this universe to that universe, seamlessly, like instantly, in the crypto space. I think that world is coming. I just don't see it. Like, there's no way we're going to adopt half the effing world in here in the next 3 to 7 years at the current state of what we're doing. This needs to evolve. And as this evolves and we use trustless bridges a lot more, and interoperability just is a thing. So if you develop something and it happens to launch on Binance, it doesn't matter where it actually launches, because you can go anywhere you want to from that point with that token. Like, you could take BNB token and come over to Ethereum, and then it's not wrapped, it's just BNB. And then you could take that and go over to Pulse. And from there, you could go to Phantom, and you can go wherever you want with that particular asset. And I think that's going to change a lot of things to what GRC was asking. As that takes place, I think that could break a lot of the systems that are currently in place, or at least make them evolve or change, or 2.0 type things come out as that comes out. Do you see anything like that on the horizon? Like, I see interoperability. Like, I think we're going to solve that this year, maybe next year, in a trustless way, where it's going to have a massive impact on crypto as a whole.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. There's still a lot of friction in using the blockchain, and especially if you really get into it, using multiple chains. Like, it feels kind of cool and you feel kind of badass, using all these bridges and going from chain to chain. But after you do it for a while, you get you're like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore.
Oh my God, that's my life. That is my life.
What a good analogy.
Screener, don't show me Blockchain Bridge, don't show me MetaMask, I'll throw up. Like,
what
please,
a good analogy.
like I'll edit videos, just fuck off. Like, no, for real though, you have to. It's a UI is tough. It's tough. It's just like, oh, this is work. This is
because you have the wallet, then you have the bridges, and you have the RPC settings in the wallet. Then you got to do the bridge thing and the fees out there.
Imagine in 2 years what it's gonna look like.
Yeah. And so that seamless user experience obviously is going to be once that breaks, that's going to be a big barrier that's gone down to allow people to flood in a lot more. And then trustless bridging is another big ticket innovation that somebody can basically make a name for themselves forever if they solve it sufficiently for the entire space to fork and utilize. So yeah, I agree with everything you say. I see multi-chain versus multi-layer, maybe semantics at that point, or it becomes irrelevant on which one it actually is. But I do see different networks being used or being built that optimize different things, and then people trying to find the blockchain or the L2 or whatever it is that best fits the thing that they're trying to build. And because everything's connected seamlessly, it doesn't actually matter where you build, because it's all kind of together. So some people some people think there'll be multiple chains and then it'll be a highways connecting them. Other people think it's just going to all be L2s on top of Ethereum. Whatever way it actually sorts out to be, I think it'll be multiple systems, multiple networks that are connected somehow, and we're all using it, and it's all at least sufficiently decentralized.
Do you personally think it's more in the realm of Google search, where Google search has 80 to 90% of market share depending on the market, and Bing has 87% of the remaining search, and there's 2 or 3% to Russia's search engine and 2 or 3% to China's search engine? Or do you think it will be more in the space of maybe say auto manufacturers, where there's the top 10 players all produce more than 1 million vehicles a year, right? Or what do you think? Do you think it's going to be more broad space, or do you think Ethereum is going to just continue to be the dominant player going forward? Obviously, it's conjecture, but
probably the former, just because the Ethereum has such a big first mover advantage. It has a first mover advantage. It has it has meme value in that when you talk about crypto, it's to like somebody who's not in it, it's like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Like those are like the first two words that come out. Everyone knows what Ethereum is. So it's like the ability to catch up to that is hard. I think Pulse Chain has a legit shot at being like a competitor to a degree. It's hard to say because it's not out yet. We'll have to see, but I wouldn't underestimate Richard Hart's marketing ability and the fanaticism of the Hex community. So I think it has a legit shot at being, you know, a Pepsi to the Coke, if not a competitor for the Coke position.
And because
way,
I believe a lot of that's because Hex is on chain too. Stays on chain, really sticky on chain. Really helps it be like right on ETH, like a glove.
Yeah. And that people think of that as a negative thing. But what if you, like what you said, GOC, like what if you flip that on its head, right? Like everybody's like, oh, that's a negative, oh, they're gatekeeping or this, that, and the other thing. When in reality, what if actually having Hex not be on centralized exchanges is the advantage?
It is.
Right? It
truly is. I really do believe that it makes a dynamic level that some, even Zen, will never see due to it being traded on centralized exchanges right off the jump. So what if the 08 is exactly never moves anything and does everything amazing? That's a crazy proposition. That's a wild proposition. People don't really realize that. Like, that's a lot of the reason us guys are here still, in a way. We don't always verbalize it probably, but like, my God, we're still all on chain. What a blessing in a world where I can't research things off chain very well. I really, frankly, can't do it at all. It just takes forever and it doesn't make any sense because the fee structure is different. Everything's different. And I know in the future this will all be mixed up, but for now, Hex is pretty solid.
Wow. Yeah. I just got the eerie sense that, like, in a very, very short period of time, our kids are going to be like, oh, you lived when they had fiat? Like, we're going to get that.
Oh, right, you were able to sacrifice for this? Like, you have a wallet that's part of the sacrifice set? Like, yeah.
You were around when you had, you know, to put in RPC settings? What a joke. Yeah. How did you do that? Like, how did you go through these things? You had to pay that much in fees? We're going to be in that world.
It's on that trajectory.
Yeah. So let's switch back to Hedron for a second. I still am tracking the growth in users for Hedron and Icosa and Hex. And I've seen Hedron kind of like flatlining, going down for a bit, several days and or weeks, kind of like coming back up, and then kind of like just sitting there going sideways. What do you feel? What do you sense with the Icosa stakes being sold, the Hex stakes being sold to Icosa, and the Hedron? Like, how do you feel about that whole situation right now?
I feel really good about it. I mean, we have a really, let me pull up. I have it up.
And we double back on this is all on chain as well for the Hex talk. This is also on chain, which is really cool.
Yeah, so we have 4,315 HSIs in backlog. So those auctions haven't started. And then just looking at, let me go to Hex model. Just looking at kind of a quick snapshot on how many T-shares are still being put into the auction. You know, let's see, what's today? Today's the 15th of January. And so coming out tomorrow is 721 more T-shares onto the auction. The next day, 558, 178 after that. And you know, just recently in the past couple of days of volume that's been sold to the contract, so T-shares that we're not going to see for another 90 days. So far on the 13th, it was 41. The day before, the 12th, was 400. And the 10th was 464. So we're still seeing consistent 3-digit T-share volumes at single days being sold to the HSI auction now, even with a 36% discount from the Icosa ceiling price, with a backlog of 4,600 of HSIs already exists, already like that are ready to be started. And so obviously most of those are smaller ones that are not as profitable to start, and people go through and pick out the larger ones to start. So there's an element of that these are less desirable ones. However, they're still there. And so as the hex price goes up, and then the less amount of shares get more and more valuable, it becomes more profitable to be able to start those and get those rolling. And so we're just getting a big backlog of things ready to go. And we're seeing it slow down, the HSI buyback selling, but it's still, I'd say, at a significant level where we can project out 90 days into the future and even give another 30 to 90 days leeway after that based on the backlog. So I see the system very healthy right now. The yield is padded pretty well because we're getting burning every single day from the auctions that are happening. And on average, there's usually about 10 to 40 auctions live at any given point in time. So right now there's 13. And so, yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with where things are.
So do you see this as like we had a big sell-off with the FTX thing happening in conjunction with this Icosa flipping over in the yield and the 90 days from selling to Icosa all happening at about the same time? And then I think that there was probably overhype for it, and we probably contributed to that, the three of us.
Hey, I want this record to get straight really quick. 96 views. Are you kidding me? Only 96. This is my first ever short. That I did. Hedron, free airdrop. Stay tuned or stay wrecked. I was locked in, fam.
What's up, guys? Jim Rat Crypto here. Listen to me real quick. Hedron, right up top there, 111% on the daily. This was a free airdrop given away to Hex stakers. That means if you had Hex stakes on Hex.com, you were given free Hedron. It's up 111% on the day. What else in crypto is going on like this, guys? Follow us, the Hexicans, Jim Rat Crypto, official pulsification. This is the future of crypto, guys.
So,
Alex, you son of a bitch, Alex. Listen to me, Alex. You come on the show, okay? Let's give my heart and soul out there, all right?
So there was like probably an overhype in regards to clearly, obviously, we saw this. It was definitely overhyped. And now we're in that didn't play out the way I thought it was. So people were buying in advance and then hoping to sell. That didn't happen. And a lot more people sold off, right? Because they bought into it early in anticipation that the price was going to go up for Hedron and this massive thing happening. But in reality, it wasn't. It goes on day one. It all happens. There's steps in this process, right? And it hasn't taken that many steps in here. At what point do you think that liquidity if you say, I haven't been following auctions, but if you say that daily there is auctions, people are taking place. I've been tracking the HSIs and they've been perpetually coming down until the number you just said. Like I track it maybe like once or twice a week. And it's been every new input that I put into the spreadsheet, it's been going down over the last couple of times I've tracked it. It's kind of flattened out a little bit at like 4,200 and change. And you just mentioned it's 4,300. So at what point do you think that there's a pinch in the Hedron supply to be able to buy those, assuming there clearly is activity happening?
Yeah. Let me think. So wait. What exactly is the question? Let me just make sure I got it straight.
How are you thinking about the supply pinch for Hedron?
So I think
given that people are still selling to Icosa, people are actually going in there and buying those, which then obviously uses up the Hedron to burn. So at some point, inevitably there has to be a supply pinch, right? Of that.
Yeah.
If this is presumably, you could look at the numbers, and I haven't, so that could be wrong here. But you would think that the amount burnt of Hedron on a daily basis at this point, relative to how much is coming on the market, because it's going into people's mints, right, for free, but it's dust basically at this point. So people are just leaving it there and it's not getting access. So the amount that's on the marketplace is that liquidity has to dry up at some point. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. So it'll probably happen more kind of like we've already reached that point a little bit with Hedron, where any new stakes being made, that inflation is negligible to the system. And so really the Hedron being burned in the auction is a little bit less than what's being minted. So it's still net inflationary, but much less so than what it was. I think it oscillates sometimes. I think there was a week or two where it was actually deflationary for that period in time. And so I think most of that's probably going to happen as the hex price goes up and we see all of the value of those HSIs that are backlogged be higher. And so you're going to need to burn more Hedron to be able to get, it's going to be worth burning more Hedron to be able to get those higher prices if the price of Hedron isn't tracking hex at the time. But I think the big thing is just time as a lot of these 10x minting bonuses stakes go away. Because not all of them are 15-year stakes, and actually probably only a small percentage of them are 15 years. Most of the people who have 10x bonuses have ladders, like quarterly ladders, monthly, yearly, quarterly ladders, whatever it is. And so as time goes on, those stakes are ending, which means their minting power is consistently being diluted over time. And so even now we're seeing it's getting harder to push the Hedron price down, and less people who want to be selling have the ability to do so. And some of this is the stuff that I'm seeing from like Axis and Silver's work in our Discord group. And so just like now, it's like getting harder and harder for people to push the hex price down. That same thing is happening over time with the Hedron system. And you get
a lot of people don't mint their Hedron. A lot of people don't mint their Hedron. So many people don't mint their Hedron, dude. It's ridiculous. Like, if you watch it and look, you will see. You'll be like, "Oh my!" You can't even really project it because once it gets more value, people pay more attention. But so many hex stakes come out.
Another thing to consider is if Hedron, if Icosa ever goes up significantly in price and starts to test that ceiling again, that's going to turn the faucet on again of a lot of HSIs being sold to the liquidation auction, most likely through arbitrage. Mostly through arbitrage. It'll also probably be a point where people are taking profits, but I think both will happen simultaneously. We'll get an uptick in volume, and so that'll help with the burning of Hedron as well.
As far as the Icosa pool, any price action? I would like to talk about the price action of Icosa, unless you had a point right there.
The only other point I was going to make is that more and more Hedron's being staked over time. So some of the inflation is getting funneled to burning. Some of the inflation is getting funneled to staking. Some of it's being funneled just to people who are holding. And then obviously some of it's getting funneled to being sold on the chart.
That'll be interesting because if there is like price appreciation for Icosa, the people who are on the fence will just take it over because they're like, okay, even if hex stays the same, but obviously they're tied together, but they do oscillate slightly differently. And if Icosa does go up, those people who are on the fence about selling their hex stake to the Icosa contract pushes them over the top, because if for whatever reason in some period of time somebody decides to dump a bunch of hex, while at the same time somebody is acquiring or building position in Icosa, there can easily create a differential in there, which means that hex stake that I was going to sell is now 20-30% more valuable, and it makes sense to utilize it at that point. So that's very interesting.
And keep in mind, we're already past the most inflationary period of Hedron, which was technically day one, where everybody got their backlog of 2 years worth of Hedron up front. So the sell pressure that we see going into the future, just like by definition, is less than what we've seen in the past.
What metric are you using to gauge? You had mentioned that inflation tends to be, at least in this short term, as in several weeks or days, presumably, higher than the amount that has been burned in Hedron. I think you're pulling it up, and feel free to share that so we can show the audience here, because that would be.
It's just here you go. I got it right here. There you go. So it's hexmodel.com, a great site by Dev Huey on Twitter, and you go to the Hedron tab right here, and then it's the first thing that pops up. So you can see through the entire life of Hedron right here. It's actually coming up on its year anniversary, which is pretty cool. 1 year of operation. So that's pretty cool. But you'll see that so far it's about 80 trillion minted and then 8 trillion burned. But you know that most of the burning happens once those auctions started, which I believe was around, let's see, what day is that? 167? Is that it? 167?
Yeah, it looks about it, right? Yeah.
170, yeah, 171. Yeah, so it's somewhere around here. We'll go with the last month, so 130 days. So from 300 to 324, there was 1.74 trillion minted and about 570 billion burned. So this one is about net inflationary within the last month of 1.2 trillion. If we look versus, say, the first month of the system, it was basically net inflationary of 33 trillion tokens.
Yeah. It's a massive difference. Yes.
Massive, yeah. And then if you extend this out a little bit more, say, let's go to like 260. Let's see. I think it evens out. Yeah. So within the past, say, 2 months, about 2-3 months, it's almost even. So it's about net inflationary of about 500 billion in the last quarter.
And then check the slope of the line in the chart on the right hand side.
Right here.
Right, like where the blue line and green line, right? Blue is minted and the green is burnt, but there's a slope differential where the blue line definitely is growing at a faster rate than the other
minting.
One. Yes.
Yeah, and you can kind of see that right there, where that's actually this has been going like logarithmic for a bit. And about right here, day 313 is when we crossed from deflationary to inflationary. And I think this is probably to be expected. Most of the burning happened towards the beginning of the auctions because that's when the largest hex stakes were there. Also, that's when there were the most attention, so there was the most competition. And you'll see the Hedron minting has pretty much stayed linear over this period of time. In terms of the rate. So I think this trend will probably continue where this is flattening out.
You see that widening, that gap widening?
For a period of time until we start to see a little bit more action on the auctions and maybe another cycle through for the HSIs that were recycled in those first couple days. So around, let's go. So if you go to the HSI buyback, on Hex model, you'll see that so the reason why the Icosa price went down so much is because a lot of people were getting good deals relative to the Hedron burn versus the Icosa they would be able to mint from it. So it's like the arbitrage I was talking about before. You spend $1,000 of Hedron and you get an HSI that you can mint $1,200 worth of Icosa. That happened a lot. So people were recycling these HSIs through the auction. And around February is when we start to see more of them coming out again. So February 14th, you're getting, the 13th, the 12th, 6,000, the 13th, 2,000, and the 14th, almost 1,000 T-shares coming out on those days. So there's going to be another ratchet, kind of like an echo of the day one of Icosa. It's like the second iteration of that, of all that recycling. And so there's going to be another big tick up in burning because so many more T-shares are coming out, and that'll flatten that delta from those two lines that we've seen for a period of time. And I think it's going to be like that. It's going to oscillate.
And then there's probably going to be, you would think it might do that again, based on people's
next
behavior,
round,
right?
Yeah.
And you'll have this lumpiness that probably smooths out as time goes on to how much is burnt based upon how many people this group of stakes inevitably over time should even out to be more evenly dispersed of T-shares, but it might take some time. Some of them has to come to maturity in terms of like ending their actual stake, and then others are just like, I'm just going to end up holding it. So that's fascinating.
And you have to keep in mind, so around these time periods is probably when Icosa has the highest probability of dumping, just because there's probably going to be some recycling going on for people getting good deals. But a lot of people aren't getting deals relative to Icosa right now. And so but they are getting a deal relative to the cost to make the stake. So say like,
explain that.
Yeah. So say you're putting in $1,000 of Hedron, and the amount of mintable Icosa is only $600. You've lost money from that perspective. But say it takes $1,500 to create that stake if you bought Hex off the market and sent it out for 15 years. Well, you still made a $500 profit relative to the market value of T-shares at this given point in time. And so a lot of people are still getting really, really good deals, like up to maybe 60, 70% off of T-shares on the liquidation auction. Now,
wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. And it scales up the higher you go in volume. So like the more T-shares that are in a single HSI, the less competition there is for it, because not as many people have enough Hedron to bid on that. Right. So like if you need 50 billion Hedron to be able to even get that 80% discount, like it already prices out most people. Like it prices out me. I'm not able to compete. That's for the whales. So they're getting really cheap T-shares, but keep this in mind as well. So the thing that the cost to make a stake, that is actually the same price as the Icosa ceiling price. Those two are the same. So when Icosa is at its ceiling price, that's the same dollar value as the cost to make the stake. So as the Icosa price goes up, say like we're right here for the cost to make a stake. Here is where the current Icosa value is, and somebody's getting a deal in between, where it's not a deal relative to Icosa, but it is a deal relative to make the stake. As the price of Icosa...
Sorry, go ahead.
I'll just finish this thought really quickly. As the price goes up and up and up, all of a sudden it reaches this point where some people are in the money for the Hedron that they bid previously when they were out of the money before. And so that could trigger a new round of recycling if people want to immediately take profit on the trade that they made in the past.
But that also is a way that is probably happening to a certain degree for certain large players to manipulate the system, in the sense that if I have a lot of capital to play with, I can, where this has only been accessible from a Hex, like stake it for 30 days. It's not profitable for you to stake, 1,000 Hex for 30 days because of fees. It's just not possible. It's just not profitable. Where it has been profitable from if you have a large bag. Now, the people with large bags can manipulate the Icosa price down because of that, right? So that just, you know what I mean? I haven't really been paying attention to Icosa that much, but that's an issue, right? Like it makes it less likely and increases the probability that it won't ever go back towards that ceiling if there's at least one or two players in the marketplace that just do that, right? Because so what I mean by that is if I have a large Hex stake that I sell through Icosa, and I know that it requires 100 billion Hedron to buy that, then what I did is I just know who I'm going to be competing against. And not a lot of people are paying attention to the liquidations relative to other things going on, right? So there's a decent chance that I can go through and buy my own stake back at a discounted price, and then repeat this and just continue to dump Icosa down further and further and further.
So
it's like just taking the brute for everything. It is like Sam's just like, it almost takes the brute of everything, but then again, the liquidity is so low, and Alex seems to. That's where I want to touch on at the end, but please.
Well, real quick. So you have to also think, what are they doing to be able to take advantage, to be able to manipulate the market like that? And they're burning a bunch of Hedron. Like in that each iteration that they're doing it, if it's in a range that's inaccessible to most people, we're talking about like, tens of billions, if not close to hundreds of billions being burned with each iteration, because there are a lot of people who have enough Hedron to compete at a like 80-90% discount. And so they're really burning through their Hedron bag fairly quickly. And you got to ask, how much mintable Hedron are they allowed to do that? Are they replenishing their Hedron sufficiently every 90 days to be able to do that with each iteration? And take into account that there is a 90-day lag between each iteration of this, right? So they're providing us value by burning their tokens, which they're not selling on the market because of. They are giving us more yield because of that. They're giving us Hedron yield in the form of recycling that HSI. And then what's the other thing on top of that? those are the main two things that they're providing in order to manipulate the Icosa price down.
But we also know players too that are in that different ball game of numbers than us, right? Like there's another multiple zero. So if they've got 6,000 T-shares at a 10x multiple and be like, I'm just minting 6 billion Hedron per month for free because they're at a 10x and they have so many T-shares, right? And they're like, okay, cool. On average, I've got a 9-year, duration for my stakes. Like, I mean, it doesn't take more than a couple players that have something set up like that, which could be very like, not good for Icosa price. If right, like if we're talking about this, there's probably somebody else that is either doing this actively or thinking about doing this, right? Because it's like
I think that's a good. I don't mean to use the term like derogatory because it normally is like an imaginary horrible, right? The question I wonder is like, well, so how are these people profiting? Like, what are they doing? What are they gaining from doing this? Because they're recycling their same T-share that's already theirs. So they already own the T-shares, yet they are hurting a price of another chart. And I don't see like where they're profiting in this way, unless you just assume they're
right. Well, so let's think. So how I was thinking about this. So if you have a position that a lot of people can't buy in terms of a hex stake, I go through and sell that. I get Icosa, right? I can take that Icosa, put it into a liquidity position to sell that through liquidity, or even just dumping it on the market, and then in 90 days buy my position back at a discount relative to how much Icosa that I got, right? So the further that Icosa goes down relative to Hedron, right? So if I got, say if it's a $1 million hex stake, right? And that $1 million hex stake gives me, how much are you pulling out on an Icosa for like $1,000 stake? If you have $1,000
stake.
What, for the first 180-day term?
For just right, like if somebody has $1,000 or like 1,000, what say one T-share or something like that, how much is somebody going to get in Icosa value?
Let's see. So, don't show that, please. Sorry.
Oh, don't.
Yeah, 1 second. I'm trying to think if that was my website. I'm going to release it later. I'm trying to remember if I can run through that calculator on my website.
Oh, okay, so just give me. So say if I had $1 million, you can pull out say $800,000. Does that seem reasonable, or is it lower than that?
Oh, for Icosa?
Yeah, if you have $1 million hex stake, right? Does that seem like reasonable? You could pull out 800,000
via Icosa.
Yes.
It's 43% off its ceiling price, so you're only able to get like $570,000 out of it.
Okay. So say you have something. Say if it's 100,000, right? Because there's probably not nearly that much liquidity in Icosa. Say like $150,000 or $200,000 hex stake, and it's 200,000. You're able to get $100,000 worth of Icosa out of there, which you can put into a liquidity pool to sell, or just directly sell it, and then you're able to buy that back for less than the $100,000 that you actually got out of the system.
Okay, so the HSIs are not going for that cheap, basically. They're not going for less than what you sold it for originally.
I thought you just said they were going for like 60-70% off.
Off the cost to make a stake, not relative to the Icosa that's redeemable, right? So like if you made a $200,000 stake, you can pull out $100,000 worth of Icosa. They're going for about like $150,000 worth of Hedron on the auction market.
Okay. So the T-shares that people can purchase through the liquidation are selling for about 70% of like par, par being what you can actually create it for in the marketplace. Does that sound about right?
Yeah. Okay. These are rare deals. Like they aren't happening all the time, but like some of them have gone through that cheaply. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. That makes sense. And maybe the probability of somebody probably want to do that is probably pretty low. And calling it imaginary horrible is probably not far off. It was just a thought experiment that I was thinking.
Yeah, I didn't want to use that term, but I couldn't think of something off the top of my head to use. But maybe
the way
education
I
is
like
probably a
to-
better way to say it.
The way that I like to look at it is the chances are probably better that it goes up more than projected rather than less when the Fed starts printing. Like, and that's what like Richard kind of taught us a lot of that stuff really early on, where he was kind of like, "Hey, I know it seems odd and all the numbers don't fit, but when the Fed starts printing, they never stop. They don't stop. Like they don't stop. Like when and we saw that for years and years and years on end. So." Basically, this is either, in my eyes, this is either all going to work out just fine. With Icosa and Hedron, at least. I'm not going to talk about some of the other perpetuals because I don't feel the same about all of that necessarily. So, I've loved Hedron and Icosa since the beginning because I really saw that people could use it. And then there was there's also some borrowing features that can kind of be unlocked over the years. I don't know exactly how that's going to work, but if in my imagination that would take a long time, just for value's sake, like would need like more value within the system. But we should stop because that was a lot. And these nighttime episodes, I just am like, you guys
always run down a good line of questioning with Sam. Never a dull interview.
Oh no.
I appreciate the insight that you gave me in talking about a basket of LP, which we might do a show in the morning on if I could talk him into this, or I might have to do a separate show on that. And I appreciate that because I like it when I get challenged and think about things in a new, unique way. So thank you, Sloth. If you guys are not following Sloth, check him out. We'll have the link down below, or you can check. That's your handle on
Twitter.
I'll have a nice thumbnail and all his links listed right.
Eventually, you'll be seeing lookintehedron.com right next to my name too. That's coming up pretty soon. Yeah.
Oh, Gerardo, correct.
Yeah. I look back. I bought that domain like 3 days before Hedron launched.
Smart move.
And it was funny. There was somebody else in one of like the Telegram chats who was like, "Man, I just looked up to trying to buy lookintehedron.com and somebody already bought it." And I was like, "I know who did that."
Oh, that's awesome. Hey, looking forward to when that comes out. Let us know and we'll go through what your site does.
Yeah. Perfect.
All right, guys, I'm going to drop you down real quick. I got a message from my guys. Real quick. Thank you so much, guys. That was incredible. I just want to give
a little ton of fun
peace out for the people, and so we can get everyone
always have a good time
subscribed up to the channel and everything. Give me 1 second, guys. What an amazing episode this has been. You know we're here live every single day, crypto in the morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, and I do very much appreciate the support on the channel. The channel is growing, and it is all because of you guys. Thank you so much. It is helpful and encouraging to see people tagging me and posting clips and all of these things. And I do appreciate everyone that subscribes. Let's get to 5K subs right away. I mean, are you kidding me? 5K subs. I'm going to try to get 100K before the year's over. And I'm going to go so balls to the wall. And if I don't do it, whatever. Who gives a shit? But I'm going to give it hell.
You already know what time it is.
Crypto in the morning.
Crypto in the morning.
Crypto in the morning.
We ain't on phone.
Crypto in the morning. Crypto in the morning.
We're gonna take notes.
Crypto in the morning.
Crypto in the morning.
Crypto in the morning.
We ain't on phone.
Crypto in the morning. Crypto in the morning.
We're gonna take notes.
Smoking a blunt on my way to the gym. 11 a.m. and I'm already tuned in. Got me some hacks and I'm making a state. Got me some Hedron, I'm making it rain. Pay me some maxi and that's just in case. Jim Reddit sent me to show you the way.